Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, choir. Thank you, Keith. Yeah. You can applaud anytime you want. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Nance Marks. Thank you, worship associates. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the Diversity Caucus. Thank you to all who answered the video call and sent me your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, your hopes, your histories, and your stories about the topic of whiteness, racism, white supremacy, power, and privilege. It was an honor. It was an honor to read each and every one of them. What you shared helped me to shape the framing, the bedrock upon which the message today comes. And as I said earlier, I will not be using any of what you shared verbatim, not even anonymously. So please let go of any concern about that. Most of all, thank you for coming here this morning, for bringing yourselves to a place where indeed you might find, rather than comfort, rather than a quiet, safe space, you might find a place where you find pain or discomfort or challenge. We'll see. Maybe not. I'm willing to live with that ambiguity. Will you join me? One thing is for certain. If we come here or anywhere with preconceived notions, defenses, protective mechanisms put into place, what we fear is what we will hear. If we come here in fear of being hurt, of discovering that this is no longer our community, which is impossible, if we come here with a fear that we don't belong, we will find reason. We will invent it even to believe that that is true. If we come here bored, knowing it all, here to be sure that the others that need to learn do so, we will leave here today unchanged. But let's try this. If we come willing to be changed, even just a little bit, to what might happen, to what we might hear, if we come with courage, I promise you, we will not be disappointed. I didn't walk alone to get here this morning. You brought me here. Someone asked me, are you doing this whole month thing just because you're an interim? Because you know that addressing whiteness, racism, power, privilege, white supremacy, are you doing it because you know you can't get fired? So at first I chuckled. And then I had another thought, and I thought to myself, okay, so when children go to college or when people are moving away often, something happens that causes a rift. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Let's not do that. We've come too far and we've done too much together to end with a rift or separation because it's more comfortable to think I'm the problem or to think that the topic is the problem. So, I'm doing this, talking about whiteness and racism and white supremacy and power and privilege, because this is who you are. First Parish in Brookline. You are a congregation committed to creating a beloved, diverse, multicultural, multiracial community. And this is one, not the one, but one important next step. It is a step that we cannot sidestep because the timing isn't right, or because I'm your interim minister, or because October has 5 weeks instead of 4. Whiteness, racism, white supremacy, power, and privilege. The title of today's sermon is Define It, Please. What do these words mean? And how do we connect with what they're calling us to be and who they're calling us to be? I'll share a little more on some of that in a couple of minutes, but I just want to say, most of you can do a much better job, a much more thorough job of answering those questions than I can. I'll also talk about why they matter and how they are inextricably connected to being a Unitarian Universalist and a person of good conscience. But first, I want to share with you my personal revelation that came about in preparation for today's sermon. So I had asked many people to send me things, and that's an open invitation, by the way. Send me things to read, to review, to look at. I wanted to learn more. Now, some of you may remember and have been here when I preached last year, and I talked about the fact that the first time I was asked to learn about these topics explicitly was 4 years ago by our association's ministerial fellowship committee. It was the regional subcommittee at that point. And they said to me, in your continuing preparation and movement towards ordination and service and ministry towards our congregations, learn more about these topics. Live into them. And I have been. And you have been instrumental in that. And again, over the last couple of weeks, I pored over these articles. And I read them, and I sat with them, and I was with them. It was Thursday night. Something changed inside of me. I realized in my cells, I knew it not intellectually, but in my being, that race is not about skin color, and that it is not about individuals, although it most definitely impacts all of us. In the most truly bizarre turn of events, I actually had to depersonalize this subject in order to get it. What I mean is, I had to not be thinking about myself and what I knew or didn't know. I had to not be thinking about people that I know and love who are people of color. I had to not be thinking about my family members who are people of color and my colleagues and you. I had to depersonalize it. I had to let go of my defenses and my fear. And I got it. And I don't mean I know it or that I have nothing left to learn. On the contrary. This is about knowing it. This part is easy. This part is what I'm talking about. And for me, it changed everything. I began to play with things like, what if our mission statement read all the things it says, and then where it currently says to dismantle racism, what if instead it read to dismantle oppression? Now, I'm not suggesting that you change it, although you may consider adding to it, but let's just stay with that for a second, because that's what happened for me. I finally understood that this is about oppression. Understanding racism as oppression means that I must respond. As a person of faith, ministering to a beloved community of people who are committed to the worth and the dignity of all people, who are committed to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, which are our first and second principles of our faith. A congregation who covenants to work toward the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and with a respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part, our sixth and seventh principles. As that person, how can I not respond to racism, a political, economic, societal system of oppression that impacts people, millions of people, people sitting right here among us, and people in this town and city and around the world? Sharing this conversion experience with my spouse, he listened, as he always does, so well. And he said, the word that keeps coming to me, Rebecca, as you're talking about this, is artifact. Artifact. Quote, an object made by a human being, typically of cultural and historical interest. Something observed in a scientific investigation or experiment that is not naturally present, but that occurs as a result of the preparative or investigative procedures. Racism, a construct of beliefs and attitudes, or, as defined by Henry and Tater in 2009, a democratic racism, as the way in which racist behaviors, actions, and outcomes are codified in society. All four forms of racism, intrapersonal, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic, all of them are created by humans because of a cultural and historical context. They are not natural. Rather, they are a result of something that is prepared or designed to produce them. In other words, they are intentional. And it's an artifact. Whiteness, which for many historical reasons is understood in America to be the dominant or superior worldview or narrative, is used as the standard. It's like the bar by which all other things are measured. It's used to oppress others who are non-white, which, by the way, changes. Who those people are changes over time. It is an illusion. It is made by humans, and predominantly men, white men. I'm married to a white man. I have a lot of relatives who are white men. I love white men. This is not about hating white men. It's about stating the obvious. So, we can learn everything, right, intellectually that I'm talking about. There's much to read and discuss and understand. History, many of us need to relearn. But let's put that learning part aside. What do we as people of faith do about this? Well, I know for me, I can't turn back. I must respond. My faith and our Unitarian Universalist principles call me to do that. As I learn more about what white culture is, by the way, I'm actually mighty happy to consider enlarging it, changing it, and for some of it, just downright discarding it. Tema Okun describes white culture as being focused on perfectionism, where mistakes are seen as something bad, wrong. White cultural norms identify a person's worth and their value by their degree of perfection. But it is perfection as defined by white culture. How are we to learn and to grow if we cannot make mistakes? If mistakes are not seen as inherently inescapable and essential to development, what if instead we applauded every time a mistake was made? And what if every time a mistake was made, we asked ourselves and each other, what did I learn from that? What if we didn't hang our head in shame? In perfectionism, we are frozen, we are hidden, and we are deemed unworthy. We hide our humanness, and we put on airs of false pretense that cannot possibly be true. They just can't. No wonder it's so hard for those of us that have been raised in this, embedded in this supremacy of white cultural norms, to admit we've been mistaken. And that's just one example. Tema Okun goes on to write, as many others do, about other things in this white standard and culture of whiteness, about the sense of urgency that is upheld, valuing quantity over quality, being defensive, and underneath of it all, individualism. It's all about me. Even us, but a very small us. The opposite of so many other cultures who make decisions instead focused on the impact of the long term, 7 generations from now. Tema Okun writes that these attitudes are damaging because they're used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by the group. And they're damaging because they promote this white cultural view. And she says organizations that unconsciously use these characteristics as their norms and standards make it difficult, if not impossible, to open the door to being multicultural. So that the first step is simply being able to identify and name those standards that you want to make yours. Can I just say that again? That it is about taking a moment to claim and name the standards and the norms by which you want to live and be in relationship. That's our faith. That's our covenant. Right? We don't live by dogma. We don't live by creed. Why are we going to live by other things that say, this is who you must be? Why aren't we going to ask ourselves, who do we want to be? How do I want to love? How do I want to be in relationship? And let those be the standards that we move towards within our congregation, within our families. A beloved one of you told me that in your relationship, they look for a generous emotionality. They look for radically loving their partner. Yes, I thought I want to radically love my partner, right? We get to choose. So whiteness is a construct. It's a human-made artifact that is deemed to be the best or to be superior. Whiteness is the dominant culture, even if we personally understand it. It is the superior worldview, and it is a worldview that dictates laws, social acceptability, economic decisions, and on and on. Each one that is made, inherently putting whiteness at the top, oppresses other people with different worldviews. So that defines whiteness and white supremacy and racism. But what about power and privilege? Kevin Phillips defines power this way, and this was the one that really resonated for me. He says, what is power? It is the ability to tell people what the problem is, who is responsible, and what should be done about it. That's what power is. Privilege, my friends, is being the one that holds that power. We could talk about that in a lot of situations, but I encourage all of us to ask in any relationship, in any interaction, anywhere we are, who's getting to say what's wrong? Who's getting to say what needs to be done about it? When do we need perhaps to act differently ourselves? There's work to be done, and it is our work collectively, and it must be done with love. Don't think that just because I'm talking about whiteness, you're going to get me away from love. If there's one thing that I pray lives on long after I'm gone, is that the answer is love. What's the question? The answer is love. And that you'll all say, yeah, Reverend Rebecca, oh, she's the one that always talked about love. We need to do this work in love. Because evil doesn't conquer evil. In fact, if we demonize the people around us who are in fact on the same team, in this beloved congregation or anywhere, if we demonize and separate from them, we demonize and separate from ourselves as well. And we diffuse our collective power, and we get stuck in thinking about ourselves. Ourselves being this community, our own selves, whatever. We need to support one another, love one another, accept each other's mistakes. Paul Carr says about this work, accept that no one knows everything and that we are always learning. In his 15 proposals to initiate transformative change, he also says history is not unidimensional. Humility is an unbelievable virtue. Humility. Humility. You know what humility means? It means being willing to learn. And he says, consider the proposition that there is hope. problematize war. Problematize war and fight for peace. Which is why in the 5th week this month, I'll be talking about nonviolence and what it really means. Why are we talking about whiteness, white supremacy, the dominant worldview, racism, power, and privilege? We are talking about it and acting upon what we learn because we are a people of faith. People of faith and conscience that covenant to work together for the worth and dignity of all people, to promote world peace and honor the interdependent web of life of which we are all a part. In a reading about worldview, Matt reminded us of the story where if you teach a person to go through the back door and there isn't a back door, then they'll create it rather than going through a front door. We must be path makers towards dismantling oppression and creating worth and love. We must practice it first with ourselves, being compassionate, telling the truth, asking for help, being willing to change, and identifying how this dominant culture operates in our lives. And then we practice that in our relationships with each other, compassion, curiosity, forgiveness, identifying with common goals. And then we do it as best as possible, and this is all simultaneous within the world. That's what we're really called to do, to be path makers of human worth and dignity for all people. So my friends, here's my point. Racism is not about skin color. It is about oppression. And we, as people of faith and moral conscience, who are committed to the UU principles, principles of peace, equity, and liberty for all people, who uphold the truth that all people deserve worth and dignity, we cannot remain silent. We cannot remain the same. We must change. And we must do everything in our power to end this oppression. Amen, and blessed be. We're going to close in ritual. So I'll explain what it is. Hopefully everyone has a stone. Do you have a stone? If you don't have a stone, maybe raise your hand so our ushers can bring stones to anyone who doesn't have it. By the way, as I explain what this ritual is, these stones that you're holding, perhaps you were with us when we did the service early on in my time when I started with you, and you put your blessings in a stone. Do you remember? Were any of you here for that? And you blessed these stones, and then you gave them to each other. Those stones have been put into baskets. They've been used in our children's chapel several times, and I should have told you that. And they sit in my office whenever I get distraught, whenever I feel concerned, whenever I need your strength, I go pick up those stones. I've given a few to a few of you. Those are the stones you hold. Here's what I invite you to do. I invite you now to take a moment and to reflect upon what you've just heard. Maybe where you were when you came here this morning and where you are now. And ask yourself, what is it that you can commit to in this process of being a path maker of worth and dignity, where we work to upend everything that oppresses and put energy and love into all that equalizes and empowers? What is it that you need to do? It can be a commitment to coming to church every week this month. Remaining open, talking to someone, taking a certain action, asking for help. What is it that you need to do? And then, what is it that you commit to bringing and offering to this community? Compassion, willingness, strength, forgiveness, open-mindedness, love. Put the energy of your two commitments into the stone that you are holding. Your commitment of what you commit to yourself towards this work, and your commitment of what you will bring to this community. We're going to stand in a moment, and we're going to do this ritual together while singing. So we'll stand and start singing our closing song, and we'll sing that just as long as we need to sing it, and then maybe one row at a time or something. I know you can figure it out. We're going to place your stones, and we're going to create our own path. The choir has started this already. Their stones are here. I think they got walked on. Hold on. Yeah, they got walked on. All right, so here goes. So the stones are here, and you're going to come forward and place your stone. The only requirement is that it touch the stone behind it. This is our path. This is our path towards ending and fighting oppression, towards addressing issues of whiteness, racism, inequality, power, and privilege. It is a path that started long ago. I don't know where it's going to go. There's no pre-laid path here. You're going to make that path. So you're going to put your stone, and wherever it goes is where it goes. And then on Monday, I've ordered biodegradable spray paint. Yes, it is biodegradable. And we're going to spray paint along the path. And this